Hey, welcome to BlackRock. My name is Dan and I'm on staff here. Before the sermon starts, I want to take a second to invite you to join us in person if you're able. We have a thriving and diverse community of Christ followers that meets in person every week on Sunday morning at 8:30, 10, and 11:30 a.m. If you have any questions about visiting or about our church in general, feel free to check out blackrock.org/visit or email me at guests@blackrock.org. Now, here's the sermon.
Good morning, Black Rock. How are you on this fine, wonderful morning? Excellent. Winter is like on its way. Woke up, my car was covered in frost. But anyway, well, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you here today. For those who don't know me, I'm Mike Bulkley, and I have the distinct pleasure of bringing the word, but also just being together with my family today, and you are family. This morning, I have a sermon series that we're starting called Before You See It. And my sermon message for today is hidden in plain sight. But how many of you have ever heard the phrase, seeing is believing? Right? How many of you yourself have said something along the lines of, I'll believe it if I see it? Right? That's me. Show me and I'll believe it. But you know, there's the problem with that. Because see, as Christians or even as humans, we look around and we have a way of thinking that the world should be around us. That there should be a certain order, a certain way that things go. And so this logic breaks down because often the way we see the world around us doesn't always line up with the way we think it should go. Life seems to contradict what we think we know about God and about the way his world should work. And so we see things like pain and suffering, injustice and moral failure. We see Christian leaders who we put on high pedestals and they fall. And all of a sudden, it rattles everything we believe about God. Or another thing is often we don't see the whole picture. We only see a part of it. Now, what happens when you get around people and you have a large group of people? Everybody sees the same thing, but they only see parts of it, or they see the same thing, but they have different perspectives. Anybody be in situations like that lately? Culturally, politically, we're all seeing the same thing, but we have a whole different perspective on what it looks like. And what we end up seeing is confusion, anger, sometimes hopelessness, isolation, because people just give up. You know, it's interesting as I'm counseling with people, been doing counseling for a number of years now, and when I'm dealing with people who are in crisis and they're going through difficult things and they claim to be a Christian, or they say they come in as a Christian. And you know what the interesting thing is? The question I hear so often is, where is God? Where's God? Because see, we're so programmed to need proofs before we're going to believe something. We tell ourselves it would be so much easier to believe in God if he just showed up or if he just did some kind of miracle. The interesting thing I find is that, ironically, many people in these situations, when I'm talking to them, they say they believe in God, but when I question them a little farther, they don't have the slightest clue what they believe about God. In 1999, two scientists, Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris, presented an experiment called the invisible gorilla experiment. And what they did was they had 6 students with basketballs, 3 of them wearing white and 3 of them wearing black, randomly walking in circles, throwing the basketballs back and forth to one another. And what they instructed the viewers to do was count how many times the students wearing white threw the basketball back and forth and count the number of passes. And so the viewers studied very carefully and they kept count. And interestingly, almost everybody got the right count, 17 passes. But then they went back and they debriefed with them, and here was the interesting fact. that while all of this was happening, a gentleman with a gorilla costume walked through into the middle, beat his chest, and kept walking. And when they talked with people, they found that more than half of the viewers never even saw the gorilla. And it wasn't because they weren't observant. They were hyper observant. They got every pass that was tossed randomly, but they found something profound. And this is what they said. You often don't see what's in front of you. You only see what you're looking for. That's the heart of the series that I'm starting today called Before You See It. Because often God is doing something right in the middle of your life. He's guiding you, He's shaping you, protecting, and He's redirecting you, but you often don't notice it until much later. You know, we often don't see it until things like a crisis, after the confusion, after heartbreak. But here's the problem, and I have found this as I do counseling so often, as humans, we replay the memories of our traumas. We replay the memories of our angers. We replay the situations we've been in so often, and we keep looking at those, and we struggle to see God because we can't see past the pain of what's happened to us. But just because you can't see God does not mean He isn't there and wasn't there. And I'm here to tell you something, and I want you to hold on to this as we start this series. God is standing in the middle of your picture. Often you're not going to recognize Him in the moment, though, until you learn how to look for Him. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 5:7, we live by faith, not by sight. My text this morning is found in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 3 and 6. And Paul says, now faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe He exists, and He rewards those who earnestly seek after Him. In 1993, I don't know if you're a kid of the 90s, right? My girlfriend at the time bought me this book, the Magic Eye book. Anybody remember the Magic Eye books? Oh yeah, right? Some of you are like, what is that, you know? So these are called stereographic images. And she bought this, and we were all, there was a group of us looking around, and we're all passing around looking for the picture within the picture. And all it looks like is these squiggly randomnesses here. And so it's just repeating patterns and colors and swirls, and I call it chaos on a page. And it seemed like all of my friends could see the picture, or at least they said they could. And I could never see it. I would look for all I want. Anybody see the picture? Can anybody see it? Anybody tell you what's happening in there? Well, see, I felt stupid because everybody seemed to see it, but I couldn't. And so I wondered if I was being played. I had to make a determination whether I believed it. But here's the thing. Here's how you see the picture, right? Number one, you hold the picture close to your face, and then you start to slowly move it away. But what you have to do is you can't look at the picture. You have to let your eyes relax and unfocus, and you have to look through the picture. And the longer you look at the picture, it should suddenly pop out. But I could never see it. All I could see was random patterns and chaos. Here's the problems with seeing the picture. Number one, you have to believe that the picture's actually there. Whatever it is, you have to believe there's a picture that you can't see. But the problem is as long as you're looking at the surface of the picture, you're never going to see the picture under the picture. So you have to believe it's there. You have to be able and willing to look beneath the picture. But then here's the other problem. There's this term called apophenia, and it's the erroneous perception of patterns and correlations in random or unconnected phenomena, events, and data. Basically what it means is we as humans are programmed to look at random things, and we have such a need for order and control, we will insert our own image even in places where the image isn't there, or we will make an interpretation about something that may have nothing to do with it just because we need order and we need things to make sense so badly. So here's what happens. Sometimes we start to see the picture, but then we question if it's just an illusion because suddenly our eyes start to adjust and the picture begins to get blurry. And in that process, our eyes get uncomfortable. And then most people just kind of like snap back and they see the surface again. And then often the reason people don't see the picture is because from there we give up. And we decide we can't see the picture because maybe just only special people can see the picture. Regardless of what you want to believe or how you feel about the picture, the fact remains that behind the randomness of these patterns and chaotic swirls, there is indeed a picture. But I've also found in my life that that's the way it has felt so often. Chaotic and random. And I found myself having to look and say, God, where are you in the middle of this? I read you a text from Hebrews chapter 11, but I want to go back a little bit because if most Bible scholars will say that Hebrews 11 is a parenthetical chapter, which means it's a parenthesis between chapter 10 that transitions it to chapter 12. Okay, so why is that? Because chapter 11 explains something about chapter 10. So here's what we read in chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Remember those early days after you received the light. What do you think that means? Those early days after you received the light. It's when they receive the truth of Jesus, right? All of a sudden they become Christians and they're excited and whatever, right? And here's the results. Remember those early days after you received the light, when you endured in great conflict, full of suffering, publicly insulted and persecuted, and stood with others in the same situation. You suffered unjust imprisonment, and listen to me, and joyfully accepted confiscation of your property. Wait! Whoa. That's not what I signed up for when I received the light. I came to Jesus because he was going to make my life wonderful. He was going to make everything make sense. And these guys are responding to things that are beyond their control with a joy. How is this possible? And the answer is verse 34. Because you knew that you yourselves had some better lasting possession. Here's what Paul was saying to them. Here, the writer was saying to them. You went through all of that, and you did it because you knew there was something greater ahead that you could not yet touch, taste, or feel. Matter of fact, he says, let me talk to you about that. It's called faith. And he goes into chapter 11. These people held on because they had something bigger than the picture at hand. And so the first thing we understand is this. Around here, you've heard these three terms: believe, surrender, and grow. See, the first thing we have to do is we have to decide what we believe about the random pictures. We have to we have to decide what we believe about where God is in the middle of the circumstances we can't control and that frustrate us. And so Hebrews says this: faith is the confidence in what we hope for, the evidence for what we can't see. Most often, our problem is the things that we put our hope in. See, we put our hope in situations going right, getting what we want, and getting what we feel we need, things going well. We put our confidence in the things that we can control. And when things are going the way we want them to, guess how we feel about God? He's there. He's right. God is so good. But what happens when things are not going that way? Suddenly we begin to question God's existence, his presence, even his reality. See, faith is not tied to circumstances. Faith is a belief that God is in control of the circumstances, whether I see him in the moment or not. I have to choose what I believe before I even see it. Number two is this. Faith, first of all, faith is understanding. Faith helps us trust God even before the pattern gets clear. We have to believe he's in control. And then to do that, if he's in control, guess who we have to believe is not? Right? So if I'm in control, what do I have to do to give somebody else control? I got to surrender. And so it says over here in verse 6, faith trusts God's goodness before understanding his plans. Verse 6 says, without faith, it is impossible to please him, because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists, and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Our problem is we have to surrender our way of thinking. We have to surrender our sense of control in order to see him. Let me tell you a story. 2018, our daughter got sick, Hannah, 11 years old. And the short version of it is, we're in the hospital. She's in critical condition. The doctors are first telling us, don't worry, 12 hours, your kid's gonna come back to you, you're gonna get it. They told us that she has type 1 diabetes and she's in diabetic ketoacidosis. They don't know how we walked into the hospital. She should have been in cardiac arrest. Her blood chemistry was so bad. And they said, don't worry, 12 hours. 12 hours went by, she was not better. 18 hours went by, she was not better. 24 hours went by, she was still in critical condition, crying, Dad, just want something to drink. They wouldn't allow her to eat anything, drink anything. No, you can't. And I'm sitting there, we're crying. At 35 hours, I had to leave the room. And I remember standing downstairs in the lobby, and I was pushed up against the glass, literally nose to the glass, back to the room in a corner, weeping, just staring out the window, going, God, why? God, I'm a pastor. I'm giving everything to you. Why my kid? Why? This doesn't make sense. I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and a security guard is standing there. And she just, excuse me, sir, I have a word from the Lord for you. I'm like, whoa, okay. And in short, what she said is, God is with your daughter now. She didn't know anything. God is with your daughter. He's in the room, and he's doing a work of restoration, and you will even see it in the next moments. I ran up to that room so fast. And sure enough, her numbers came around, and literally at hour 36, they're walking in the door with a menu saying, you can now order anything you want, right? Wonderful. But God didn't heal my daughter. She still has type 1 diabetes. And I still walked out of there going, God, thank you for her life, but now she's got this lifelong condition. What do I do with it? How does this make sense? If God, if you're gonna heal her a little bit, can't you just go all the way and heal everything? 3 weeks later, we're back at the hospital. We're doing a follow-up, and she sits with the social worker. And the social worker begins to ask her questions like, who is it that you have you can talk to? Hannah's like, talk to about what? Mind you, she's 11 years old. Well, about your anger and your sadness. And Hannah's looking at her like, well, I could talk to my mom and dad. She's like, no, well, about those things that are hard to talk to. She's like, about what? Well, she said about being sick. And my daughter just looked at her. Sure as I'm standing here, she just looked at her kind of confused and said, I have diabetes, but I'm not sick. In that moment, I saw something. Because there's a fact of life that was there that my daughter's gonna deal with, but at 11 years old, she understood something about control. God was in control, not her, not the situation. God had a plan. It was amazing, and it gave such a reminder to us that God, okay, you have a purpose and a plan. I have diabetes, but I'm not sick. See, the reward is not stuff always being fixed. It's not stuff all of a sudden always going well, but it's being able to be in a situation where we have no control, where whatever, but because my faith and trust is in God who resides inside the picture and in control, that I'm able to let go, and I receive the reward of his peace. 94, bought my first motorcycle, thought I would teach myself how to ride, went around the block one time, great, no problem, went around 2 blocks, no problem. Third time, went a little farther, I said, I'm coming back, I'm coming a little different way, and 2 blocks away, I see a patch of sand, and I know that you don't want to take a turn on a patch of sand, but I have to make that turn there. So I'm looking at that sand going, don't hit the sand, don't hit the sand, don't hit the sand, don't hit the sand. What do you think I did? All right, and what do you think happened? Right, got the bike up, turned it off, and I walked it the block home. 2008, decided that I was going to try riding again. But this time I did something different. I took a motorcycle safety class. And the first lesson I learned is this: wherever your eyes are when you're riding a motorcycle is where your bike is going to go. If there's a hazard, don't look at the hazard. Look beyond the hazard to safety. Because if you look to safety, you'll hit it every time. But if you look to the hazard, that's where you're headed. And so often in life, that's exactly what we do. We replay the hazards of our life and we wonder why we keep hitting them over and over and over again. He's calling us to surrender our way of thinking and our control and look to him because he's got a better safety for us. Number 3 is we've got to grow. Faith matures when we trust God with the results we may never see. Let me say that again. Faith matures when we trust God with results we may never see. Listen to this crazy verse. Remember chapter 11, right at the top, it says, they were all commended for their faith. They trusted in God for the things that they did not see. They trusted in God's promises and they sought after him to receive the reward, right? And then you go through all of chapter 11. It's 40 verses long. And all the way through 11, you know what it is? It's they were kicked out of this plan. They were cut down. They were cut in half with this, with a saw. They were burned. They were aliens. And wait a minute. These people that are noted for faith, all of their life stunk? Hello? And we get to verse 39. It says this. Remember, this is the end of the chapter about faith. And it says, these all were commended for their faith. Anybody want to be commended for your faith? That's it? How many of you want to be commended for your faith? You knew the setup was coming. These all were commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, that only together with us would they be made perfect. Sometimes for all of our searching, we don't see the evidence up front. Regardless of what I see, what remains is what I believe. See, there have been times raising our kids where we gave them instructions that they didn't always understand. They didn't always like the way it felt. And they would kick and fuss, but we held firm to what it was we had. We remained because we knew it had a purpose. And in time, they began to see some of the results of that. And it felt really good when our kids came back and were like, Mom, Dad, thank you very much. But you know what's happened as I watched my kids mature? Is the true mark of maturity for them is when they've simply learned to trust that in time they would understand. And thus, there's not the argument anymore. There's trust that's built. 2000. I was in a philosophy class. And I was frankly really struggling in this class. And it came to the final and I had a really low grade because I was struggling with the concepts I'd never really thought about before. And now the final project is we had to give a graphic illustration of our worldview. So one student had a pair of dice and to him, life was nothing more than the roll of a dice. Another one had Legos and he's like, life is what you build of it. And I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? And then it hit me, oh, I know. And I remembered that I had this book that had been sitting on my shelf for 7 years. And over time, I would pick it up and I would look at it and I would try to see that picture. And I never did, but it suddenly dawned on me. And so here was my thesis. I believe in a loving and just creator of the universe who by his nature is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. It is his desire to have relationship with man and show him the wonders of his nature here on earth and the joy of his presence in the life to come. The struggle is to figure out how to see him in a world of seeming chaos and strife. The man who chooses to disbelieve will seem right in his belief, and he will never find absolute proof of the existence of God. But the man who chooses to believe will find evidence of his divine presence overwhelmingly and absolutely true. And as I finished my statement, I ended up picking up this book, and I randomly opened it to page, I'm randomly opening it right now. I randomly opened it to page 19 just so I could show everybody, and I glanced at the page, and I almost fell over, and I instantly started crying in front of my college class because a picture of a lamb popped right off the page. I kept this book all those years because I believed one day I would see the picture. I couldn't control when I would see it or how I would see it, and no one else could see the picture for me. I only saw it because I was willing to believe it was there, and I kept searching. And in the same way, I was willing to share my faith in Jesus. And my faith in Jesus wasn't, he did all these wonderful things for me, and so that's my proof. It was, I believe he's there, and even in the moments where it's been confusion and pain and struggle, I have found peace. And now I've seen a lamb. If you want to see the same picture in your life, you have to believe he's there. You have got to look past the messiness of life, your histories and what's happened in the past. You've got to let your eyes unfocus from the surface, and you got to begin to look through for it. And you know what may happen? You may see him. As the worship team is coming up, life is the same way. But what are the chaos points in your life that you're trying to make sense of? What are the pains and the agonies? What are the things that are frustrating you? Maybe that things that you're trying to wrap your mind about. What is it you're unsuccessfully trying to make sense of or control? I'm here to tell you, I have seen Jesus do amazing things, and then I've also lost sight of him. I've questioned his purposes, and I've even gotten frustrated when I didn't hear him or see him the way I wanted to. But I know this: when life is most chaotic, it's in searching for him and in trusting him, regardless of the storm that is produced in my life, the reward of his peace, even before I see him. And that is my prayer for you. Can you look past the frustrations of life? Can you look past the seemingly random chaos? Can you look past the patterns of history that seem to control you and say, God, would you help me see you beneath this? And until I do, I put my trust in you. That's my prayer for you today.
Thanks for tuning into our sermon here at BlackRock. I'm so glad you found us, and I hope and pray this message helped you get more connected to Jesus. Speaking of connection, if you're interested in taking your next steps towards getting connected at BlackRock, use the quick links in the description below. There you'll find links for information if you're new, for upcoming events, online giving, and more. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our podcast so you can stay up to date with everything we post. See you next week, either online or in person. Thanks for watching.